Hello everyone, Derek Culver here, also known as Blazing Heavens on Instagram, and I'm here with my first post-processing video that I'm putting up. I was recommended by a friend to go ahead and look through some of my more iconic images that were recognized and try to recreate them and show you guys how I did them. So this is going to be my Mt St Helens shot. It's actually one of the first shots that really kind of got me noticed in the astrophotography community. And I'm going to go ahead and go through the whole process from start to finish with a little bit into the planning and why I chose Mt St Helens and how that affected my settings. So I'll talk about how I actually shot it a little bit, and then we'll dive right into the post-processing and how to put a couple different pictures together. So first off, we're here at Mt St Helens. This, of course, is in my home state of Washington. And Mt St Helens is really, really nice place to shoot. I'll show you why. So here we have a light pollution map. I'll get there in a second. So Mt St Helens is nice and close to a lot of cities. It's pretty close to Seattle. It took me about it takes like 3 to 3.5 hours to get there. And once you get there, you have really, really dark skies. You're in... I don't know how accurate this light pollution overlay map is, but this is what I use, like light pollution map, or if you just Google a light pollution map, you can find something like this, so you can actually see using the Bortle scale. Of course, a city like Portland or Seattle is going to have terrible light pollution. You're not going to be able to see anything. And then as you branch out into the wilderness, it goes from warm tones to cool tones as it gets darker, and then dark is, in these dark areas with no color. And Mount St. Helens and also Mount Rainier is up here. They're super dark and they're great for visual, and they're also super convenient. I think they're a really perfect balance, both of these mountains, for stargazing and for scenery. And Mount St. Helens especially I like because once you get over to Mount St. Helens, you go down the whatever highway, like the Spirit Highway down here. It's an insane drive. It's gorgeous. You have a bunch of stopping points, and you can honestly shoot astro from a lot of them and get a lot of great views there. I chose the Johnson Ridge Observatory because it is so convenient. If I zoom in here on the map, you just pull up into the parking lot right here, and it's literally a 2-minute walk to an insane view. So you have the Johnson Ridge Observatory right here, and right south you have Mount St. Helens facing the blast zone and everything. So you're looking from the north down into the south, right? You can see right into the mountain where it blew up. And there's some really great history surrounding this mountain. And I know there's a lot of like environmental impacts and geological, I think, or just everybody who studies volcanoes or any of that kind of stuff. There's huge impacts and implications, and also learning opportunities in the area. Let's see if this loads up. There's an insane view. This is literally the view from Johnson Ridge Observatory, and this is a little bit zoomed in because I also have a deeper focal length. And so you're looking right here, and off to the south, as we see, so we have Mount St. Helens here, and we have Portland down here, mostly south and a little bit to the west. If we look at the light pollution map, so I was from the north looking south down on the mountain. So on my right is going to be a little bit of light pollution from Portland, and I'm actually okay with that because I like the way that the light pollution from Portland kind of adds this warm tone over on the right side of the image, especially with the clouds during the long exposure. It lit them up real nice, and then I kept the color balance and tones over here a little bit more blue, and I changed that in post-processing. So the whole light pollution setup, because it's not completely dark, I shot on an equatorial mount, which is, oops, actually I closed down my pictures. I shot on an equatorial mount here, which is basically a device that you align with the North Star, and it'll rotate and compensate for the Earth's rotation, so you can shoot much longer than just your typical rule of 500 30-second exposure. This particular one I think was 2 minutes. So here we have the tracked exposure, and what happens with the tracked exposure, you get way better dynamic range, you get way better detail, lower noise, all that great stuff. It's a lot of work to polar line your EQ mount and set it up, but I definitely think it's worth it. And then you also have to do the post-processing work, which is probably why you're here, is because you've been interested in EQ mounts, or just you like my editing or whatever. And so one of the biggest problems with polar the equatorial mount and the whole tracking idea of it is that you have to composite your images. So when you're tracking the sky, then your foreground gets blurry because you're following this juicy Milky Way core, and you don't give a shit about the mountain during this one. Excuse my language. So you need to take a separate image for the foreground. And I come over here, and here's my separate image for the foreground. This may seem a little off. For this particular shot, I shot it during daytime, and it was a longer exposure, so this was like late sunset. And a lot of the times, because I can process really well, or depending on my schedule or what I'm trying to do, I shoot a lot of my foreground shots before I shoot my nighttime shots. So I arrived at Johnson Observatory in the afternoon, hiked around, had a great time, and then waited for the sun to start to set, enjoyed it, and I shot a bunch of foregrounds throughout sunset, late sunset, twilight, and then a little bit into the night. And once the Milky Way was up, that's when I started tracking. I've also shot. I will shoot my foregrounds during the night when it's completely dark and the Milky Way is out, but I don't like shooting my foregrounds for a couple reasons at night. You have to use higher settings to gain light. You have to really either do a super long exposure, which is fine because, well, it's fine for some cameras, because some cameras, after a long exposure like this, if I was to shoot this, in the middle of the night, you could either do, 12,000 ISO in 30 seconds or something to try to get this lit up. Problem with that is it's going to have a lot of noise, and it's not going to be a quality foreground. What you could do to compensate for that, if you wanted a high quality foreground but it's night, is shoot a long exposure. You shoot anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes if you wanted, with the appropriate settings. What that is going to do is get you probably a nicer foreground depending on your camera. And what I mean by depending on your camera is that some cameras, I know my D810, my Nikon D810 can handle really long exposures, but I have seen even on my D810, which is a nice camera with good quantum efficiency and good signal to noise ratio, and just good overall low light capturing, is that you start getting hot pixels. Your sensor heats up during the long exposure because you're exposing for so long, and you start getting these hot pixels. And some cameras can get really bad hot pixels after a certain amount of time in shooting at night. So that is a viable option. The other reason why I don't like shooting them during the night, if I can avoid it, especially when the Milky Way is overhead or there's stars, I don't want to waste my precious Milky Way time when I'm out here shooting. I want all my when the Milky Way is up, I want to be shooting the Milky Way. I don't want to be wasting 6 minutes on a long exposure foreground shot. So you can time it with your planning to get to your shot and your composition early and shoot it during day. You can shoot it during twilight, which honestly is really ideal because twilight has less hard light on the mountain, less shadows, and it will have a more balanced blue tone naturally, so it's easier sometimes to work with it in post-processing. So yeah, and then so you can just, let me pull up the EXIF here. Yeah, so we got half a second, whatever, and I shot it at, so this is also a perspective blend. So I shot this at 70 millimeters. I wanted to get a more zoomed in profile portrait shot of the mountain. And I did what's called a perspective blend, where I use a different focal length for the Milky Way. So this is actually a technique. Some people use perspective blending with their landscape photos. They'll shoot like a foreground that's really close to them, like flowers or anything, at a really wide angle, 14 millimeters, and then they'll shoot a distant mountain at like 35 or 50 millimeters. What happens with the wide angle lenses is you get a lot of, I don't know what to call it, but I guess size distortion. If you've ever shot wide angle of a mountain, I'll shoot Mount Rainier at 14 millimeters, and the thing looks like a hill that you could climb in a couple hours. I don't know what to call it. I guess kind of the distortion in size happens. So one way to combat that is using multiple focal lengths. And so by shooting a 70 millimeter here, I shoot a 35 here, and it may not be 100% accurate. It's pretty close, but it makes the mountain look big, and it makes the Milky Way, in a sense, just give it a totally different perspective. So here's the final image. So it really emphasizes the mountain here. And so when I go to my EXIF data on this image right here with the sky on the tracker, so don't notice that my dimensions are usually better than that of a D810, but these are the files that I'm uploading so you guys can work along with me and have the same files. So it says 30 seconds. That's not true. I had a manual like shutter release cable at the time. I didn't have an intervalometer or anything fancy, so I'd have to manually hold it down the button and then lock it and set a timer on my phone and then come back and hopefully switch it off in the right time, because sometimes you get distracted when you do that, looking at the stars or talking with other people. Anyway, I decided this is a 2-minute shot, so this was 60 seconds. Actually, wait, no, it was I think it was a minute and a half. So it was around a minute and a half, so 90 seconds, and then f2.8 ISO 800. So that's the advantage of the equatorial mount, is you can drop your ISO down. You can even stop your lens down, which is what I do, and then you can shoot a longer exposure. So the exposure triangle is a little bit limited when you're just on a tripod, because you're trying to abide by the rule of 500, and not everybody's camera can handle, ISO 400 million and shoot like a 2-second exposure, right? Not everybody has the nicest Sony camera, so an equatorial mount is a really great investment if you're very astro dedicated. And I chose not to go, I maybe in a darker sky would choose to push my tracking longer if I got a nice accurate polar alignment, and I would track for much longer than a minute or 2 minutes. I'd probably go for like 3 or maybe even longer, and I try to do that. So I limited my long exposure, because what happens with the tracker is, like, yeah, you get great detail and you pick up the light, but what happens if there's light pollution, it'll bleed into your photo more and it'll be like dispersed throughout it, and you'll have this like gradient of light. And so I actually wanted to get the advantage of tracking, which I did, but I also didn't want to get too much of this light pollution glow. And I think I got a pretty nice balance. I shot a couple shots, but ended up deleting them, testing with different exposure lengths, and after a certain amount of time, the light pollution from Portland was just like washed. It was totally, my highlights were like blown out in the Milky Way and just washing everything out. So this was a good balance. So that's something to take in mind. Another hard thing about the equatorial mount is, if you really want to take advantage of it, you have to work a little bit harder and get yourself out under really dark skies. But here's kind of a balance. Anyway, let's get started on the post-processing. So I'm not going to be able to recreate this 100%, but I'll get pretty close. And that's the thing, is sometimes I'll lose a file, like Photoshop will crash when I've almost done with the picture, and then I'll go try to recreate it, and I end up getting a different result. So we're gonna cover even more than what I did in this image. It's actually better for learning, in my opinion, for me to try it again and do it over, rather than try to go through all the layers and everything and try to explain it. We're just going to start from scratch. The first thing I want to do is, of course, load my photos up into Photoshop. And usually when I load them up, it'll prompt you. I just open them up in the little viewer here, right click, open with Photoshop. And when I open them up in Photoshop, what happens is it will prompt you with a camera raw filter. Alright, so it's already open, so let me close this out. So right click, open with Photoshop. So it is going to prompt me with, oh, it's not. Usually it will, if you open up a raw file, it'll start like this, filter. It'll prompt you like this, and it'll be like, oh, do you want to make any adjustments? And you can if you want, but usually I don't, because I want my raw image, and I want to be able to do different adjustments and mess around with it. I'll show you what I mean here in a sec. So I just hit cancel, or I just hit OK at that point, and I just open it up, and then it'll open up basically raw and untouched in Photoshop. So let me delete out of this one. So I'll go ahead. I have my foreground here and I have my sky here. So what I was saying here, the first objective of what we need to do is we need to mask out the foreground and bring the sky into the foreground layer. So we're going to use masking and layering to just mask out this foreground and put the sky behind it. And then we got to make the foreground look like night, and we have to do a bunch of creative edits to make it all fit together with tones and look like a single image. We also have to align what happens here with the, let me zoom in. I'm actually on a Wacom tablet because I actually prefer to use a mouse and keyboard for all my edits when I'm doing it myself. However, I fly through Photoshop and I have a hard time putting the brakes on when I'm teaching if I'm on a mouse and keyboard, because I'll just be like a little spaz all over the place. So I'm not used to the Wacom tablet, so it slows me down to an appropriate pace, where you can actually follow along with what I'm doing. So it makes me think about what I'm doing too. So I am on a Wacom tablet. It's kind of a preference thing. I would recommend trying it out. I know a lot of people love the Wacom tablets. So what we have here is what I was talking about is when you're tracking is you have the movement in the foreground because you're following the sky. So sometimes this, if you track for longer than this, sometimes this movement right here, this blur, will eat up a lot of your sky. It can eat up a lot more pixels, and then you end up having to try to crop a lot of that out. So I could end up losing a lot more of this detail if the Milky Way, you know, depending on where it is and if there's a mountain in the way. So that's something to be cognizant of when you're out shooting. First thing I'm going to do once these are loaded in is I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. What I'd like to do is, before you watch this video, or if you order my videos, I'm going to have maybe just a PDF or a Word doc, some sort of document with all my hotkeys that I use, because I use a fair amount of hotkeys, and they will save you a ton of time in the long run if you plan on doing a bunch of editing. Like right now, I'm making my cursor bigger, and I'm just using my bracket keys. So I just use the left and right bracket key to make my cursor bigger, which is really useful rather than having to right click or click on your tablet and go to size right here. And then you almost have to guesstimate where it's going to be at. There's probably some setting that'll show you a preview of your cursor, but my settings right now just don't even show me a preview. So I have to like guess with this. So it's much easier to just use a lot of hotkeys. Save you time, and they're efficient. So first thing I'm going to do is I need to click and I need to bring this layer right here. I'm going to rename this my sky layer. Sky. This is going to be my juicy foreground. And pretty simple. We're just going to go to my sky layer, and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag this guy into my juicy foreground layer and just hold it right above here and drop it. Okay, let me zoom out a bit. Let me analyze this right now. What we're going to have here is, it's not going to fit perfectly, so we can maybe make our canvas size a little bit bigger, our sky, or we can end up cropping the foreground. We don't have enough room too. Your orientations, you'll find that all my picture orientations are on 1:1 or 4:5 ratio. And some of you may guess, yes, that's because Instagram. Everybody tries to avoid posting horizontal or like landscape images, the orientation landscape on Instagram, because they don't do as well, and they don't feel as natural on Instagram on your vertical phone. So a lot of my shots are 1:1 or 4:5, and that is, I'm a product of the Instagram. So I need to spread out my canvas here, and how I'm going to do that is I can go up to my crop tool here. And I'm just on height and width resolution, so I can just kind of go in here and click, and I can drag and guess. I like to go to a 1:1 or a 4:5 ratio here. I'll go to 1:1, and now it's just a locked aspect ratio, so I can click and drag the corners, and it'll keep the ratio that I selected. And with this image is a 1:1, but we're basically just opening up our canvas a little bit. Maybe I won't go too much on the right side. Try to make it not all, I don't want the whole image. Whoa. Let's go there. I'll crop a little bit of the sides out, and I did that because the sky wasn't filling out the whole. I didn't feel like it was. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter. I think I had to hit it twice. And now we have a lot more canvas up here in the sky to use. So I'm just going to turn my sky on, and we can see my sky layer. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn my sky layer, I'm going to turn its opacity right here. I'm just going to click over here and drag the opacity down so I can see where, so it's not fully there, it's not 100% there, and I'm allowing whatever's behind this layer bleed through to the juicy foreground. I'll grab my move tool here, and now I can move around my sky layer. I can see my Milky Way, but I can also see where the mountain is, and so I can actually move and adjust this where it's at. So I'm going to move it about right here. These should be the same size. I guess they're not. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit Control T, or I can right click because I have the sky here. I think I can right click here. Let's go. and I need to transform. So I like using Control T just because it's quicker for the transform. And I'll hold on Control and hit T. So now what we can do is we can make this larger, and I can click and drag on this bottom corner, and I can do whatever I want with it down here. I can go crazy. I'm gonna go ahead and hit Control Z to undo that. So what I want to do to keep the ratio, and I don't want to mess with any of the pixels here, and keep the ratio of what we have, I'm gonna hold on Shift, and I'm gonna click, and I'm gonna drag the corner. So now when I click and drag it, what happens is it'll stay with the same or whatever ratio it is, so it doesn't get messed up. I'll just click and drag it a little bit off so it fills up the canvas, and I'll hit enter. So let me move up the opacity a little bit. So what I was telling you with this track sky is it's not perfect. It's a little bit different with the perspective blend too. Is we're gonna have to get this mountain totally hidden on our track shot. We're gonna have to try to hide it behind this mountain, but it's gonna peek out a little bit. So what we have to do is we kind of have to drag this sky down, but we lose a lot of detail trying to get all the mountain out. I'm just gonna leave it above just for a sec here, and I'll go ahead and turn the opacity back up, and then I'm just gonna click the sky layer, and I'm gonna click and drag it below the juicy foreground so it's behind. So our objective now is to, maybe we have too much room in the sky. Let's see. Our objective now is to mask the sky out, because we want this juicy mountain. We don't want this, sky in the way, blocking our Milky Way. So first thing I'm going to do here is that the foreground is I'm just going to use the quick select tool. So I'm going to come over here to the quick select tool. I'm going to right click it and make sure I'm on quick selection. It's also W is the hotkey, and you get this little plus thing. I want to start up here. Here's the quick selection start tool, and here's how to add onto it, and here's how to subtract from it. I'm going to start with the start here. And with this one, all I need to do is I just need to click and drag along the foreground, and Photoshop is going to guesstimate what you want. And Photoshop sometimes does a great job. Y'all are in sync and it knows what you want. Sometimes it does terrible, and it's grabbing based on the colors, the tones, and what's going on, like this split between the highlights and the shadows along the horizon here. So Photoshop did a pretty good job grabbing this foreground with the quick select. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the mask button here, and it's just going to mask it. So we're going to get this nice mask on the foreground. And it's going to put white on the foreground and then black behind. So white reveals, black conceals. And let me hold on. If I hold on Shift and click the mask, I can click the mask off to disable it, so it shows the original. And then click it again, and it's back. So first thing we notice is that this looks very cut and paste, obviously. Because what happens here with the click select, it doesn't do everything perfectly. It'll actually grab a little bit too much of the sky. So we have this blue, I guess almost looks like fringing behind it. So to combat that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and double click this mask, and it's going to prompt us with the mask refinement. What I'm going to do here, let's see, it's not working. Try this again. So, okay, so it's showing the original right now. What I need to do on these settings up here, my view mode should be onion skin, and it should be transparency here. Yeah, so I need to turn up the transparency so the parts that was masked out is gone. And what I want to do with the edge detection here is I'm going to use these tools to have Photoshop automatically come in on the horizon and recede the horizon a little bit and get rid of this blue. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move the radius up about 2 pixels. So it's going to grab 2 pixels off the horizon. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see what's going on. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do shift edge. I'm going to shift the edge backwards. So by going into the negative on the shift edge, it's going to interact with the radius. So it's going to take 2 pixels, and by percent, it's going to go and recede from the horizon. So let's go, and I'll go do smart radius as well. I'm going to shift the edge a little bit more. And look, so it's a lot of the blues are disappearing. And then I'm also going to, I don't like feathering. I want maybe just a little bit, like 0.2 pixels. Smoothing will get you too much of an unrealistic. Sometimes you'll have really jagged pixels, and so you can come in and smooth it out, and it'll kind of make the sharp edges look a little bit smoother. I don't mess with it too much, or just every now and then. It's kind of a situational thing. Contrast, will add contrast basically between the on the selection, and so I'll usually up the contrast. These are things that you'll mess around, and it's a foreground by foreground case. It really depends. I'm just going to kind of glance along here. So here we have Photoshop totally messed up, and we grab way too much of the sky here. That's just obvious blue. So we're going to come and fix that in a minute. We're just going to do the kind of fine adjustments here on the mask edge. I'm just going to go red. All right, looks good. Maybe we accidentally grabbed a little bit right here. And you can get as meticulous as you want with these foregrounds. So now mine saves. When I hit OK, mine saves as like a new layer, as a copy. So then if I was to go to the old layer and click it on and off, I can see what we got rid of. And my general rule of thumb is it's okay to recede on the horizon and lose a little bit of foreground rather than grab too much. So yeah, we're losing a little bit of detail right here, but we're also getting a quick, easy foreground line. And nice foreground masking. So I'm on my new mask right now. I'll just leave the visibility off on this one. Do masked foreground. Rename it. And if I go into the mask here, this is how I get rid of this stuff right here. This is pretty easy. I can just come over to my brush. I'm going to go on normal mode, and I'll up the opacity up to 100%. I'm going to right click and prompt with the hardness, which is how hard and soft your brush is. I'm going to go up to a hard brush because I don't want any feathering. I'll go to about 95, and then I'll zoom in here. I'll make my brush a little bit smaller. No, I need to make it a lot smaller. Can make it even smaller here. And I'm just gonna, oops, so I'm on white, so I accidentally just painted in sky. So what I need to do is I need to make sure my brush is on black, because I want to paint black onto this mask so it hides this area. And I'm just gonna paint away manually right here. I'll just come in right here and carefully paint the horizon in, and you can even zoom down to the pixel level and get a lot of these pixels out and be really precise. I don't do 100% hardness. I usually do in the 90. It's just because it has a slight feathering effect to it. I don't like doing 100% on that. And I'm just gonna, what I'm doing when I'm panning around, I'm holding on spacebar, gives you this little hand, and then if I click and move around, it'll allow me to pan around my image. And we cut a little bit over here. Go ahead and zoom out. Alright, that looks a lot better. Yep. Oh, I'm going to zoom in again, and I'm going to pan over here. It looks like, so if I don't know if this is sky or snow, to be honest. I'm going to hold on shift and click my foreground mask to disable it so I can see. Oh, that looks like that's foreground. I actually cut too much out, so I can come in with my white brush. I can even paint in a little bit right here. Okay, I'm going to hit Control and 0 to zoom all the way out. And what I'm going to do now is go ahead and I'm going to make a adjustment layer right here. I need to make my foreground look like night because it was shot during day, and you'll have it. It'll depend on how much exposure you want to drop, depending on what your exposure value was on the image and when you shot it. So I will just go ahead and go down to my adjustments right here and make an exposure adjustment. And with the exposure, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, it's on a white mask, it's just going to universally hit everything. I'm just going to drop the exposure down like that. Just drop it down about, a whole point. And it's affecting the sky now, and I don't want that. I only want it to affect the foreground. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to clip it to the masked foreground layer. And I'm going to go this, I'm going to name this darken foreground. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to clip it. I'm going to hold on Alt, and if I hold on Alt and then move around in here, I'm just holding on Alt and moving my mouse. If I go in between these two layers, it gives me this little arrow with a white box, and if I click once, it'll clip this mask, or this layer, to this layer right here. So now this adjustment is clipped to this foreground layer, so it's only going to affect the foreground. So now I can come in here and do more adjustments, and it's only going to hit the foreground. So you can mess around with these. You can do a levels or a brightness contrast, curves, whatever is, whatever works with you. I like using exposure just because A lot of times, sometimes this is a little bit too bright, and exposure just works for me. Maybe you could come in and you could do levels as well, is also another one, and maybe just hold on Alt and clip it, and then do levels a little bit, whatever works. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this levels. So one thing about the foreground that I want to darken everything. This is one way to do it. So I'm actually going to I'm gonna invert this mask because I don't want this to affect the foreground yet. I'm gonna show you something else. So I'm gonna hit let's see. I don't know how to invert it. I honestly am more familiar with hotkeys than the actual like how to find what to do in Photoshop. So I hit Control I, and then I invert it to a black mask so it's not affecting anything. And I'm gonna actually do what's called a camera raw filter. So I'm gonna go onto this mask foreground. I'm gonna go up to Filter, Camera Raw, and in Camera Raw, I have all the Lightroom adjustments that you may be familiar with. So this is a nice way to adjust everything with, it's Lightroom integrated into Photoshop. So I will just go on my Camera Raw. I'm going to drop the exposure a bit. Drop it. Maybe I'll mess around with the black point. Let's see. Because I want shadow details, but I want it to look like night. So a lot of times to make pictures look like night, I will drop the exposure a lot. And then what I'll do is I'll bring the black point and the shadows up, and then I'll add contrast. And it seems like I lose contrast when I drop the exposure and then bring the shadows and black point up, and then I add it back. So what's happening here is with the histogram and everything and the exposure is I'm dropping the highlights, midtones, and shadows all together, and then I'm boosting the shadows and the blacks back up. And what that does, so I'm butchering my dynamic range. And the reason why I'm doing that is it looks more realistic to have less dynamic range at night a lot of the times. So by lowering the exposure and then upping the shadows and the black point, I can get like a more even exposure throughout the foreground, like by bringing the shadows and the blacks back up towards the midtones. And that's what I do with a lot of my daytime and even the kind of twilight shots that I want to make look like night. And then of course you could also bring the temperature over to blue depending on where you're at. And I also like to desaturate the vibrance, and that's kind of how you make it look more like night. And maybe I'll go even more up the contrast. I'll up the I'm actually going to up the shadows a bit and drop this. And then I'm also going to bring my white point up because this is affecting the whites too much. And then because this was shot at day, I don't really need to come in and do any sharpening or noise reduction. Maybe I could do some sharpening. I might do that at the end. Maybe I'll do it now. So with sharpening, you can just come up and sharpen this, and you can do it a lot because it's shot during the daytime at low ISO. It's a nice shot. And I can also hold on Alt and click this and mask out where I want the sharpening. So it's just showing white is where the sharpening is going to affect, and black where it's not. Go like this. Maybe sharpen it up a little bit. And I can mess with the tones here too. I could keep it warm. Maybe I'm not going to mess with the tones yet, the colors yet. So keep the vibrance up. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. The one thing that happens is that, let's see. So I'm actually going to go ahead and hit Control Z. So I'm going to go with my darken foreground with this layer first, because what I want to do is I want to darken everything without affecting the whites too much. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control I on this mask. So I did the filter, but then I hit Control Z and went backwards. But if I wanted to come back again and do the filter without going through all the motions again, I could just hit Camera Raw. So if I went with this guy right here, what I can do is, with this one is even darker. What I can do here is, if I wanted to darken the foreground even more, I could go onto this darken foreground with a white brush, and I could paint it in where I wanted it to be. And obviously that's a really hard brush and not too much opacity, but I could do that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Alt Z once, and what that did is if you have your history tab open, let me pull it up. Where's it at? Yeah, the history. You'll be able to see, kind of your history of your commands, and you can always just use the history tab and go, oh, I want to go back all the way up to where I clipped the mask. Maybe I'll go. I'll go to modify levels layer. I'll go through and see. So I can go in my history. I like using Control Z, so I can go back. I hold on Control and Alt and hit Z a couple times. I can go back pretty far. So I'm going to go hit Control Z again, and I'm going to go back to when I had this levels layer. I'll just delete it. I'll keep my darken foreground, and the reason why I'm going to do that is because I want to darken everything without hitting the whites. I want to keep the whites nice and bright. So how do I do that? I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a selection on the whites in the foreground. I'm going to go up to select. I'm going to use color range. So color range is really neat because you can make a Photoshop selection based on colors. I'm going to come in right here, and I'm just going to use this little main dropper. I'm going to click on the white. And then what I'm going to do is, it's a little bit too much, so I'm going to drop the fuzziness. And I'm just going to look at this mask because I only want these white snow. I really want to keep the snow kind of bright and vibrant. I don't want to mute it. So I'm just going to drop everything. And I'm going to drop this fuzziness here. So it's only really grabbing that white snow. I'll go about right there. And I'll hit OK. And now I have a selection. So with this selection, I'm going to go up to select. I'm going to go to save selection, and I'm going to name this snow. And then what I can do is I'm going to go up to select, and I will actually deselect this. Oops, I accidentally deselected the layer. So I need to go up to select and then deselect right here. Also Control D, it shows in Photoshop what it is. So what I want to do is I want to turn this darken foreground layer on. This clip mask, so it's going to darken everything. And then on the masking, I want to paint it out because I don't want it affecting my whites too much. So if I grab a black brush and go, let's say like 20-30% opacity, and let's do a soft brush, somewhat hard because I want it not fanning out too much. I can try to paint it out of right here, but the problem is I'm also gonna, I may overhit a lot of this area and it may look really janky because I'm hitting, you know, the blacks in the area. I want to keep the dirt part here dirty. So I just hit Control Z a couple times to go back. So what I can do here is I can actually go to select, and I will load selection, and I will load the snow selection. So what I have selected here is white. So if I take a black brush and I go to 100% and I paint here, it's what happened, it's almost like having a stencil, like a tracer, and I'm using, you know, marker or color pencil, whatever. So if I try to paint anywhere where it's not selected, if I try to paint in the blacks, it's not really going to happen very much. But if I paint in the whites, it's going to happen a lot more because I have that white selection on. So it's kind of like using I don't know what they call it, but it's like if you were using a colored pencil or whatever to draw something and you had like a stencil, so it kind of mapped out where you're going. I'm going to go ahead and go to view. I'm going to go to show and hit selection edges. So what happened there is I have that selection still selected. The marching ants that show where it's selected are not going around, are not showing anywhere. So now I can do this in peace without that bothering. So I can go about, maybe that's a little bit too much. Let me go back. So I'm going to go to about, I'm going to bring this guy over here. It's my history. So I'm going to go to about maybe 15% opacity. Make my brush small, and I'll start here and I'll click here, make my brush a little bit bigger, and click and drag because I want it to kind of gradient out over here. And then I want to kind of just fill in this area. And oops, I accidentally turned my mask on behind my nice mask. So let me delete that. So I'm actually going to fill in the whites a little bit and keep them a little bit brighter. So I don't want it to kill all the snow in my image. Coming in here, I'm just going to click and add back in a little bit of the snow that got darkened. So I'll hit, let's zoom out here. Oops. Now to test this, I'm going to go ahead and go up to select, and I'm going to deselect. So that selection was still selected, but it was just hidden. So now it's deselected. So to test to see what the difference was between before we did the color range and painted it out, we can just disable the mask on the exposure, the darken foreground. So it'll disable the mask and it'll be 100% white. So I'll hold on shift and click on it. So that's the difference. It's really subtle, but to me it makes a big difference. So this is with the whole darken selection. It's muted all the whites, and this is, I hit shift again and show what happens. And this is the kind of precise selection where we're not grabbing the whites and we're leaving them alone. So I'm going to go ahead and hold on. I want to merge this with my mask foreground. So I'll grab my mask foreground here. I'll click on that. I'll hold on shift, click on the darken foreground, and then I'll go up to image. Let's go layer, and I will, where's it at? Merge layers. Yeah, so I'll merge my layers here so they're one. So now it doesn't have any mask, there's just one layer. Perfect. What I can do here now is I can use this layer, and what I want to do is I want to try to warp a little bit on my foreground to make the mountain look a little bit taller. And then what I want to do is also focus on the warping and blocking this out. What I will do is I'm going to hit Control T for transform. That's really something that I should figure out how to do. Is there something... It's ridiculous. I'll know the hotkeys for things, but not actually where they are in Photoshop. And I know how to use them, just... Oh, this is amateur hour right now. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. So I go to edit and then transform. So yeah, and it's free transform. And I'll go to free transform, also Control T. Then what I want to do is I want to right click on this, and I want to go to, well, let me first show you. I can just go like this and be like, wow, look how tall it is. Then hit escape and start all over. Hit Control, well, edit, transform, or Control T, Command T if you're on a Mac, but I'm very PC biased. So sorry for all you Mac users, and I keep saying Control, and y'all are like, what? What's coming? Oh, you mean Command, Derek? You mean Command? So what we'll do here is I will right-click and hit the warp button, and what warp allows me to do is kind of warp the foreground just slightly, so I can selectively just grab up right here and right here, and slowly just kind of make the mountain a little bit taller. I actually want to bring this down, even though it's going to show more foreground. I'll fix that later. I want to bring this down. I actually want to bring this down as well. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. So if I hit Control Z back and forth, you can kind of see just a slight adjustment, but I made the mountain a little bit taller. And then maybe let's go and hit Control T. I'll bring my entire foreground and make it a little bit taller. And hit enter. So this is what our original foreground looked like, and then here's where it looks darkened and brought a little bit taller. Really, it's just a couple little subtle edits that make a big difference. Now what I'll do is I can go ahead and click my sky here in the layer tab and go to my move tool, and I can just move my sky up a little bit, and I'll move it about right here. Great. And then what I'll do is I will also crop this, and I need to crop a little bit of the mountain out, and maybe, yeah, I need to crop it just so the top isn't showing any canvas, so about right here is good. Or what I could do, if I don't want to lose any of the mountain detail, I could grab my darkened foreground and I can hit edit, transform, oops, no, free transform. I want to make my foreground a little bit, oops, I'll hold on shift and do this, and I'll just make it a little bit smaller. Hit enter. Now I'll go to my crop tool, and I will just bring my, just click, and I'll bring my crop a little bit. So I need to go, so now the foreground's smaller, and I'll crop a little bit less of it. I go down here, and there we go. Hit enter. What we have here is a work in progress that's going to be great. I'm going to take my sky, and I'm going to grab my move tool again, and I can move this guy down a little bit, and we can crop later. Maybe I can get away with a small transformation on the sky. And I'll just go free transform. Maybe I'll just bring it up like that. Yeah, it looks, well, hit Control Z. Or I can just hold on shift and click and make it a little bit bigger. Hit Control Z. I'm going to move it so my sky is about right here. And I'll hit enter. So the way that I'm going to get rid of this, so if I want to make this work, excuse me, I'm drinking some water. If I want to make this work, if I like this composition, but I don't want to chop it up even more with the foreground and I like where it's at, what I can do here is I can grab my marquee tool, my rectangular marquee, and so I want to grab this and make a selection on the sky and bring this area up. Let me click over here so it gets away. So what was happening is if I go to my sky and I try to hit Control T to transform this and bring it up, it's bringing the mountain horizon along with it, and that's too much to work with. Hit Escape. So what I want to do is I just want to transform and bring this top area up without affecting the bottom. So if I grab my marquee tool and click off on the side so it grabs the whole canvas and bring it off to the left side here, and I can grab above the sky a little bit here into the canvas. So now I have this selected. I can hit Control T, and now I can just free transform in this area. So I can just grab a little bit right there and just bring it up right about there and hit enter. So just slight, and that didn't warp it too much. It kind of works. It looks fine. There we go. So we were able to fill in the canvas up there. So what we want to do next is we want to get rid of this little peeper right here. It's just peeping out behind the mountain, and that's unacceptable. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to clone stamp. I'm going to go over to my heal brush here, and yours may be, these two heal brushes may be in one little tab, kind of like the move here, where you right click and you have two different options. Mine are separated for some reason. So if you can't find it, you just right click on the heal brush and it'll give you the spot healer, and it'll give you this one, which is like the clone tool, or the healing brush tool, spot healing brush. So spot healing brush is great for little like dust specks or whatever in your camera, or just little places you want to fix. If I try the spot removal here, try to get rid of this, where it'll try to grab and heal this area, it's going to look really janky. There's the difference. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into my sky, I'm going to right click onto it, I'm going to duplicate the layer, and I'm going to call it sky, I'm going to call it healed sky. Hit enter, because this is what we're going to do, is we're going to heal this area. I'm going to go to my healing brush tool here, and the way this works is I make it kind of smaller, I come in here, and I hold on Alt, and what this does is it gives you a little target. So I can target right here. Let's say I want to target this little cluster right here. I can target here and start putting that everywhere by clicking now. Let me hit Control Z a couple times to go back. So what I want to do here is I want to start about right here and hold on Alt and click. So it'll sample from this area, and if I move it down right here, I can click and it'll sample and it'll fill in what's above it onto that black area. So now we have two little clusters. That may not work. So that I filled in the mountain, but I don't like having two clusters because that's inaccurate. So I can go about right here. I'm going to click, hold on Alt and click right here and sample it, and then let go. Make this a little bit smaller, and I'll image that back up to where it is, but because what happened is this kind of got a little fainted, and then this got a little fainter, and this one's brighter. So I'm going to put the bright one back up here by using the spot tool. And then I'll go into the surrounding area and hold on Alt and click. And then I'll bring that in and click, click, click in the area. So now that's nice and healed in. We lost the mountain. I'm going to do the same thing over here. This will be even easier because it's an undetailed light. So if I hold on Alt and click here, make my cursor even bigger, I can just click and hold along the horizon, and Alt and click right here, and then I'll just click and hold right about there. And if I zoom out by hitting Control 0, I can click this healed layer on and off to see what I just did. So yeah, it's nice and healed. It looks good. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple more. We can do some, I don't know what I like tackling. It's kind of a preference thing. Some people like doing the foreground first and then doing the sky. I like going back and forth. So I'm going to keep up with the sky here because I have the healed sky. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and on this healed layer, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to actually make another layer. And what I like doing is making duplicate layers. And I'll name this Sky Edits. I like having duplicate layers because let's say I do a bunch of things with this heal layer. I don't want to have to Control Alt Z and go back into my history and fix all this, or maybe I did too much. I don't like it. I like to just delete. I could just delete this layer and then go back to my original sky right here and just right click and duplicate and use that new duplicated layer to start it all over again. So I'm like, okay, I hate this heal. I'm going to delete it. So I would click and drag and put it in the trash down here. I go to my sky. I'd right click and I duplicate it and I name it whatever. And then now I have a new layer to work with. And I can try again. And it's nice to do this. Let me delete that. It's nice to do this multiple times so you have different layers where you can save and see what you did. You can go back and show people what you did, or you can go back and re-edit and find a certain place in time. So it's a very non-destructive way and approach to doing a bunch of pretty significant edits without being, going too deep into it without being able to get out. So I'll turn the heel layer on, and I'll turn my sky edits on. And what I'm going to do here with the sky edits is I'm just going to use a camera raw filter. I'm going to go to camera, I'm going to go to filter, camera raw, also shift control A. And with this camera raw, I like a little bit warmer tone, or a little bit cooler tone. So I'm going to mess with the color balance. This is a preference thing depending on the image. And I can make it really blue, or I can make it really hot and warm. So is that about 0 right here? It's a little bit warm when I was shooting. I think I was just on auto color balance. I'm just going to click and drag the sky, make it a little bit blue. And maybe I'll mess with the purple, also adds a little bit. No, I'll keep it like that. And then I can also, what I do with my color balance as well is I can also come into my hue and saturation, all into the different colors here, and I can add saturation or mess with these. I don't typically mess with these a lot. Maybe I'll do another video of just total Milky Way edits that I do. Everything from start to finish, just Milky Way. But we'll do a little crash course right here. I'll go to detail, and what I want to do here is, even though I shot an equatorial mount, it's showing the EXIF data from my foreground here because it's in the foreground file, so it's going to show that, but this is not accurate. Remember, we're at f2.8, ISO 800, and it was like, however, it was like a minute or a minute and a half. So what I do is, you get a lot of what's called chromatic aberration, and it doesn't always look bad, but if you're really meticulous or you're printing this out big and you want to get rid of too much chromatic aberration, what it is, it's this little like purple fringing around your stars, and you can get it really bad depending on shooting conditions, atmospheric conditions, what quality gear you have. Best way to get rid of it is actually, you can use the lens correction here, and you can actually use defringing. But sometimes it can be overkill. The defringing does work. The first thing I like to do is I like to just add a little bit of noise reduction to every one of my images. Just like 20% on the luminance is how intense it is. And the detail is how much like detail remains. So it depends on the image. You can just mess around with this, and it's like, this will like really mute everything. This will actually keep a lot of the detail with it. I just leave it where it is for this shot. And then I'm going to grab my color noise. I'm going to move my color noise all the way up. And so maybe this isn't a great picture to show it as an example. I can hit these little things right here to toggle between the current settings and what it originally was. So I got rid of a little bit of the extra noise, but it really does get rid of a lot of chromatic aberrations that you can't get rid of with the color profile. So the camera profile, excuse me. You come up to the camera calibration. Oh, jeez. I am struggling right now. I apologize. All right. Get back in it. Get back in it. All right. My head is in the game. I'm ready to go. Are you guys ready to give me a second chance at commentating this? So I'm in my lens correction here, and I can come to my purple because I have a little bit of blue. So I'd mess with my purples. I can come up with the purple. I'll just move it up 2. And look, you just want to zoom in, and you just want to see. So what happens is if I zoom in right here, sometimes the defringing will add. Sometimes it'll mess with the colors around it. So it's actually giving me a little bit of green. I'm like down to the pixel here. Let me zoom out a little bit. I can actually go to my green too and mess with that. Let's go. I don't know why it's giving me that little soak around there. That might be from the color noise. So let me go back to my color noise. One thing you need to do is you can overkill these. So if I go in here, and this is maybe a little bit too meticulous, and I turn off the luminance. Yeah, so what happened here is I need to go in and look at my color noise and see what happens. So I don't have that much color noise. So I can just slightly put it up just a little bit. And then I can come to my actual lens correction. And my lens correction is going to fix that chromatic aberration really well. So it's really slight, and it depends on your camera and your settings and everything, but that looks a little bit better. And you really have to zoom in for a lot of this to see, but I can tell on my screen, you may not be able to see it in the video playback, that really smoothed up the Milky Way and got rid of a lot of different little noise. I don't really mess with sharpening. My stars are already really sharp because I have a pretty good lens and I'm tracking. And sometimes I'll even stop down. I like stopping down to f4 for a lot of my shots to get get less CA, chromatic aberration, and even sharper stars. And I will go ahead and, let's see, that was kind of a little bit of color and a little bit of noise. What I'm going to do here now is I'm going to do a couple other adjustments. I'm going to actually add contrast. I'm just going to do my creative ones, just slight, and I will up the white point on this image, and then I will lower the exposure actually, and that actually is a different way to add contrast because I'm lowering everything, but then I'm bringing back a little bit of the white point. And then I will up, I don't know what I want to do. I think I'll keep, because it's kind of a lighter image with the side here we have light, so I'll actually up my black point just slightly. Maybe make it a little bit warmer. I don't want it that cold. See, the problem that I'm having here is when I make it cold, I like the coldness over here, the blue, but it makes, I don't like it where it is over here in this area. So I'm actually going to leave my color balance and show you a different way to do the color balance. I'll hit OK. Alright, so I can turn this on and off to see what happened. So now what I'm going to do is with the sky edits, I'm going to go technical sky edit. So that was a little bit more technical stuff with the noise reduction and whatever. I'm going to go ahead and hit copy. I'm going to copy this layer. I'm going to go to duplicate layer. I'm going to name this color balance. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go up to camera raw. I'm going to go to filter and camera raw, and I'm going to make an adjustment just for the color balance. And I'm going to make it nice and blue. I'm going to make it a little bit bluer. I'm actually going to go to my vibrance and lower the vibrance a bit, just slightly, and I'll make it just a little bit bluer. And I'll hit OK. So now I have this layer which is slightly blue, but I don't want it to affect over here. So the advantage of doing a separate layer here and then doing a camera raw filter on that separate layer is now with this separate layer I can go ahead and mask it. I can hit this mask button, and there's a couple ways we can do this. So I can go and I can just come in with a black brush, like 15% opacity, and I'll make my brush a little bit bigger, and then I'll make my brush soft because I want it to feather out naturally. Let me make my brush a little bit bigger. I can actually come in with a black brush and paint away this adjustment. So this is the blue adjustment that I don't want over here. So I just go onto the mask and I just paint black, and I kind of just paint it out in this area. Maybe I'll paint it. I like the core a little bit warmer, so maybe I'll make my brush bigger, and I'll just do I'm just clicking. I'm actually doing a lot out of this area. Maybe not too much to the core. If you do it too much here, I'll go to 100% opacity real quick. You could really see the transition between it, so you don't want to do that. I'm just at 10-15% is usually what I do with a lot of these adjustments because it's really subtle, and I do just do a lot of strokes. So now this adjustment is mostly just going to affect this side of the image. So I can hold on shift and click the mask to disable it, and voila. So this is a slight difference, but I was able to paint it out of here. And I painted too much out of this area, so I'll go back onto my mask, grab my white brush, and I'll actually paint the adjustment back in right here. And I'll paint it in right here. So there we go. That's how you kind of do a selective color balance. You just use a couple camera raw filters like that, and you mask them. And I can go ahead here, and what I want to do here is I'm just gonna blend these two together. So I'm gonna hold on shift and click both of these, and then I'll just look up to layer, and I will just merge these two together merge layer. So I can just merge them together, because if I try to make a copy of this, it'll make a mask copy and it won't affect, and it'll be all janky. So another way to do that with keeping the separate color balance layer is I can go to my technical sky edits layer. I can just make another, this may be confusing, you just avoid this, but I can just do duplicate layer here. I'll just name it whatever, and then I will hold on shift and click, and then I will go to image, I'll go to layer, merge layers. And so now this color balance one is in its own set. It gets rid of the mask by merging it with another layer. And then on this, I can go ahead and now duplicate. I can duplicate it now, and so now it'll work. When I do it now, it won't be masked or anything. So now I'll have a whole separate layer I can do stuff with. And so on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to go and I'm going to dodge and burn and do a couple sky edits. So dodging and burning is great. Look up Ansel Adams and the way he did it. That's always really interesting stuff. I'm going to go ahead and make my brush a little bit smaller using the bracket key. So what you can do here, dodging, what it will do is it'll add brightness, tonal value, brightness, and it'll add saturation. It'll color it in. So I can go right here, and let's go to 100% just to show you what it looks like. I can click on the core and add like a lot of that glow right here. And I like using it on my core. And then I can also come in here and use burn. And what burning will do is it'll grab, let me just take a step back. The dodge tool is usually, it affects highlights and midtones. I personally don't really use it with my shadows, even though there probably are applications of dodging shadows. I have done it a couple times, but usually just highlights and midtones because you're making stuff brighter. And then I will go to my burn tool, and what burning does is it darkens everything. And I think it might desaturate, so it darkens everything. So if I go 100%, so I have the shadow selected, so it's mostly going to affect the shadows, but it'll darken everything. So I can actually come in here with the shadows. Maybe I'll go 5%. It's real subtle, and I'll come in I'll zoom in right into the dark horse area right here, and I'll just kind of paint in a little. I'll just burn it a little bit, so it's mostly affecting the shadows. So it's a little bit. I can be pretty liberal with it. In this area, it's mostly just going to affect the shadows, so I don't have to worry about it hitting at other things. And it kind of like stencils it out for you, because it'll be, I'll just hit right in here, a little bit right here, and I'll come into these little dark areas, and I'll just kind of click once over here. He's already pretty dark. And the tracking does a great job of having that dynamic range already. Hit this area. I'll come down into here. Dodge a little bit of that. Dodge a little bit. Dodge this little area. Maybe dodge those little lanes. Yeah, the tracking picked up so much detail. So now, I'll call this my dodgy layer. I'll hit enter. So now, look at that subtle, just painted in and add a lot of contrast, but just very selectively. That's how I get my little horse here and little horsey guy to pop out in a lot of my images. Is I just dodge the horse. I'll dodge the little head up here. And then I'll come in and I'll go to my, or no, I meant burn. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to confuse you. Burn is darken, dodge is brighten. So I would burn the darks here, and I'd make sure it's on shadows. I haven't burned any of the highlights. I don't really do that often. So I'll right click over on my tool here. It's usually a hand, a pan, or a sponge. And I'll get to the sponge in a little bit. So I'll go to my dodge, and I want to highlight dodge. I'll go about 10%. I can be a little more intense with my highlights. And first, actually, I'll go to my midtones, because midtones are a little bit dimmer in the Milky Way. So I'll actually just kind of brighten up. I'll just hit just barely. I really don't like the midtones most of the time. I'll usually just do highlights in the bright areas. So I'll grab my highlights. I'll kind of click here, dodge. Maybe I'll do highlights, or my midtones right about here. So now I click and I look, and oh wow, it adds a lot of contrast. So I'm actually going to go to filter, camera raw, and I want to add saturation. So the way that I add saturation is you can just grab your slider here, or your vibrance. What's going to happen here is, let's see, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. I'm going to start over. So that's dodging and burning. So I'll go ahead and I'll restart. And so that's another advantage of what I was telling you about before, the non-destructive layers here. So I'll go ahead and go to my color here, and I'll go duplicate layer, and I'll call this saturation, because first, actually, what I want to do before the dodging and burning is I want to do some saturation, and I don't want to. It's going to affect over here more. That's going to affect over here. So on my saturation layer, I'll go to filter, camera raw, and I actually go to color calibration a lot of times. I like boosting the individual RGB channels, and I'll actually boost this a little bit like that. And then I'll actually desaturate the blues. And I'm ignoring over here because I'm only looking at the Milky Way right now. So, and then I will actually adjust the hue. I'll make it a little bit redder by the green hue, and then I'll mess with this a little bit redder. And I'm going to go to my actual my hues right here, and I'll actually go to my blue channel, and I'll desaturate that selectively. And so now it'll just hit all the blues, but then I can also it'll bring back the blues, it will bring back the other colors if I go here and saturate these a little bit. And I'll hit OK. And what I'll do with this, so here's what happens. I like the way it kind of redistributed the saturation in this area. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll hit on my mask, and I'm actually going to go up to my gradient tool. You can also hit G, but if I hit this little gradient looking tool right here and go up and make sure it's on the left one, this will actually add a gradient, which will feather. It'll be white 100% here, and it'll slowly affect less and less as it goes across, depending on where you click. So I'll click and drag this like about right here. Then I can turn it on and off, and now you can see where it affected. And then on top of this gradient, I can also come in here and you can always just manually paint in. And I can paint in all the effects right here. I want it to, maybe it'll affect it up here as well a little bit. Paint it in. So now, maybe I'll lower the opacity a bit, and I can mess with the opacity now. Go to about 55%, and I can hit the little visibility right here on and off to see how it's affecting. I'm like, okay, so now what I need to do is I need to make another layer. So the way I showed you how to do that was I need to go back a layer on the color balance. It's just a layer without a mask. I need to duplicate the color balance layer. I'll just name it whatever. And then I hold on shift and click these two, and then I will go up and merge them. So go up to layer, merge, also control E, and boom, now the saturation is its own layer. So if I go ahead and now go on my saturation, duplicate it, and I will name this one saturation core. So now I can do another layer, but I can just do filter, camera raw, and I just want to saturate for this area. So I'm just going to boost a little bit of the vibrance, a little bit of the saturation. I'll go up to my individual channel, I'll boost the red and that. And then I will also I'm going to up the white point again. And I'll hit OK. And it's going to look terrible, but what I'll do is I'll go ahead and throw a mask on it. Oops, I accidentally hit it twice. I'll hit Control Z. And I'm actually going to invert the mask here. I'm going to hold, so there's two ways to do that. I'm going to drag this down to the trash. I can actually hold on Alt, which will give me the opposite. So I'm holding on Alt, and I'll click here, and it'll actually give me a black mask. I'll hit Control Z, or I can do a white mask and then hit Control I and invert it. And then what I want to do here, the concept is now, so this selection is here, but it's just fully masked out with the black. I'll hold on Shift, and I'll actually click this, so then it disables the mask so I can see. So now I'm like, okay, I can do that gradient trick I told you where I come down to the gradient here and just do a gradient, so it'll go white from black. So I'll go white here, and it'll gradually affect over here. So I'll actually come in like right about here, affect right here. So the gradient is showing up right here where it's white and then it's black. And maybe it's a little bit too saturated here, so I like the way that is now. So it's only saturating the Milky Way, but it's not affecting these clouds over here because it was oversaturating them. I can go on the mask, I can go down to black, and with this black brush I can actually go maybe 20% opacity. It's a little bit too blue over here, so I'll actually just paint with black. I'll just click and just subtly paint a little bit of it out. And there we go. That's the adjustment. So now what I'm going to do here is I can go ahead and hit Control Alt. So what I can do here is I need to make another layer because I want to do dodging and burning. So again, I'm going to go to the layer behind it here, the saturation. I'll right click, duplicate, name it whatever, and then I will hold on Shift and add it with the saturation core with the mask. And I'll go in Image, I'll go to Edit. No, I'll go to Layer and merge the layers. So now I have the saturation core. And from here to make a dodge layer, I'll right click and duplicate. And this seems very redundant and repetitive, and it is. I'll name this Dodgy. It really is, but it allows you to do very non-destructive workflow. I can go back at any point in my layers, and these are just painted in. So go to Dodgy here, and now I can dodge and burn. So go to again to my pan over here, the dodge. I'll go highlight dodge 10%, and I'll just kind of hit the core a little bit right here. And I do want to hit a little bit of this area. So I'm going to come in right here. I'll go with my midtones. Just hit it a couple times, just slightly. It's going to bring up my midtones. Maybe I'll hit these little, couple of these little clusters. And then I'll go back to my highlights. And I'm actually going to highlight dodge this area. And then I can actually come in here, and what I want to do is I want to brighten up some of these stars. And I'll do special effects for these stars. What I want to do is we already have these natural clouds. So if you ever get, I like to call it the dirty milk, dude. I like to call it the dirty milk. And what it is it's when the Milky Way isn't perfectly clear and you actually get clouds that make this nice foggy, mystical mood. And the way that I can do that is I want to brighten these areas, but I also want to add a little bit of glow. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. I'm just going to do it normal. The blending mode will be normal. I'm going to pick a color nearby this color. So I'll go into my original layer. I'll go over to where my black and white brushes usually are. And these are the color swatches. So when I'm not on a mask, it'll give you color swatches. I'll click it, and then it'll grab this little color picker, the foreground color. And I'll pick an orange nearby. And then I'm going to desaturate it a little bit. And hit OK. And I'll make sure I'm on my brush, not my dodge and burn tool. I'll be at my brush about 10%. And what I want to do here, maybe less than 10%, is I want to make sure I'm on a soft brush, and I'll make my brush really small, and I'll click and make it bigger. So I'll click, bigger, click, bigger, click, bigger, click, bigger, click, bigger. So what I did there is I actually just added, oops, I actually did it in the wrong point. Let me hit Control Z. So what I did right here is I accidentally did all my adjustments right on the dodge layer when I made this special layer up here, which I'll rename glow. So you have to make sure when you're doing any sort of adjustments on a mask or whatever that you're on the intended layer or mask. So I'll actually go to my glow here, and I'll click a couple times and then make it bigger, click a couple times, make it bigger, click a couple times, make it bigger, click it. So that adds a little bit of glow. And then I'm going to come up to this white one, and I'm actually going to hit the little thing here that switches, and it's a whitish blue. So I'll go up here and I'll look at this whitish blue, and I'm actually going to I'll go into the blue, and I'll do like a really desaturated white right up here, 10%, and I'll make my brush a little bit smaller, and I'll click, make it bigger, click, make it bigger, click, make it bigger, click, make it bigger, and then maybe I'll switch over to orange, and now I'll start hitting with an orange, a little bit of an orange glow. Click, make it bigger, click, like that. So now these may be obnoxious to you, and it's kind of a preference, but anytime I want to add glow to a star, I usually just do a normal layer. And I'll come in with color, and I'll start right here. Maybe let's make one a little bit closer that's nearby. So maybe this one I want it to glow. So I'll just start and I'll click, bigger, click, 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 bigger, click. And as I'm making it bigger, I click every now and then. So now that has a nice glow. Maybe that was too much. Let me go back a couple steps. So let me just click this glow on and off. Yeah, so now it'll just add a little bit of glow. And then what I'm doing, once I'm done with that, I will come in with the dodge on the highlights. And I'm actually going to merge this glow with the dodge layer. And then I'll rename it Dodgy Glow. So with this, what I need, you can't actually dodge the actual layer. It'll only hit what you did on that little glow layer. So I need to merge it with an actual, picture layer with the Dodgy Glow. So I'll come in with my dodge, and I'm actually just going to, I'll come in with my dodge here. And what the dodge does is I want to add saturation and light. So I'll click about right here and make it, maybe I'll just do one like that. Do a couple times over here. I'll do a couple times over here. Then actually what I'm going to do here is I can do my kind of thing that I picked up a lot from Dan Greenwood is you can add a little bit of light source here. So I'm actually just going to dodge a couple times this area. I'm going to dodge these whites too. Oh, it's not going to affect anything underneath the horizon because this is just a sky layer. And we're about to get to our foreground here. I think the sky is good here, and what I want to do next is I want to actually do the foreground edits. So this is a long process doing all these layers, and it can get tedious, but as you learn the hotkeys and just you get good with how the order of things works and how you can layer and mask with the camera raw filters, just study that because this is applicable for any type of editing. It doesn't have to be Milky Way. You can do this with sunset stuff. You can do this with whatever pictures you want, where you want You want basic kind of Lightroom edits that you find in the Camera Raw filter. It's basically Lightroom, but it has the advantage of having multiple layers, so it's non-destructive. And with the multiple layers, you can mask and be very selective about where you put them. Here we are. Oh boy, this is a fantastic video. We're loving it. We're loving the creative edits, and we're loving that we get to mess around with the foreground now. We've gotten most of our sky done, and we'll come back. I like to bounce back and forth between sky to foreground just to make sure they're matching and they're accurate. And sometimes I'll be working on the foreground, and then I'll see, oh, I need to change something in the sky right here once I was working here. And yeah, it's kind of a preference thing. Depends on your creative approach. So we will now go to the foreground here and duplicate the layer. And we're going to do the same style where we, okay, I'm going to call this color balance foreground, color balance darken gradient. And we're going to, it's kind of self-explanatory. We have color balance here that we're going to use, and we're going to go darken. It's also going to be a gradient to where it feathers out, affecting one side, and as it moves across the other, it'll affect less. Because I want to darken and make this a little bit more blue and dark over here, and I want to keep this kind of bright and orange. So what I will do here is go up to Filter, Camera Raw, and I'm just going to lower the exposure slightly. I'm going to lower the exposure. I'm going to bring the blacks and the shadows back just slightly. And go ahead and hit this little button to see what's going on and off. I don't know why my Wacom tablet is spazzing out. Whatever. We're fine. And I'm actually going to bring the exposure back up a little bit. Jeez. It's more of a spaz than I am. What are you doing? Okay, I'm just going to have to deal with it. Okay. Look, and I'll hit this back and forth. Okay, maybe I need to darken slightly more. Get a like 0.65. And I'll add just a slight little bit of blue, barely, and a little bit, bring this up to purple slightly. Alright, I got this Wacom tablet. It's just not working out. I'm going to switch back to mouse, so I'll try to keep it slow. It's funny, the whole reason I was on it is so I can slow my spaz, fast-paced mind down. So I'll try to keep a good pace going here. What we have is I'm just going to darken it slightly, and then I will put this on and apply this to here. Yeah, so I'll apply it to this color balance darken gradient, and I need to be true to its name. I did the color balance, I did the darken, I need to gradient it. And what I'm doing is I want to darken this area, I want to bring the light, I want to keep it light over here and have a gradient. The way I try to use my images is I use focus, of course, and everything here is going to be in focus. Sometimes I go too crazy and I'll declarity this areas around the vignette type of regions of the image, the corners, and I'll put like a filter on it that'll put it out of focus, so then the focus is in the center, and that literally focuses your eyes to what I want you to. You can also use colors and tonal value, and so I can saturate here in the middle, and it'll draw your eyes to the saturation. Your eyes will also be drawn to the light, so it'll be drawn to the light source up to where the rest of the lights are. So with the color balance gradient, what I'm going to do here to kind of achieve that effect I was just talking about is I'll go to gradient. I will make sure I'm on this regular gradient, and I will click and I'll drag it from here so it starts strong, and then, oh no. So what I did there is I gradient. So this is actually the gradient and what it looks like. So I'm starting 100% white is where the gradient will affect, and then it goes towards black where it will not affect, and everything in between. I'm going to hit Control Z. So I forgot to put a mask on first, so I need the gradient on the mask. So I click and drag again. Click and drag, just mess around until I get it where I like it. There we go. So that's what's happening. And then I can come in on this mask. I can go with a black brush. I'll grab my brush here, and I'll make sure it's black, and I'll go at 15%. And I can click this on and off to see where it's affecting. And I want it to affect a little bit less up right here on the tip. And then I'll click on and off, and I want it to affect a little bit less. I'm just going to click a couple times over here just to keep this light. And I'll click right here and a little bit right in here. See these little funnels are going down? These little, in the blast zone, there's these little rivers from like lava that I think are now like rivers, and they're supposed to be like really, really deep and crazy. So I'm gonna go ahead and paint it out of here because I want a little bit of these details to be lit up in the foreground. Maybe I can come back and do some more effects on that and make them kind of pop out. That's what I like to do, is kind of make certain features of the mountain pop out, because there's nothing really going on down here. There's not too much going down here. I like seeing the blast zone, but you want to highlight kind of the important things in the picture, and that's the actual mountain, the blast zone a little bit, the mountain, and then the Milky Way. Let's turn that on and off. And then here, if I hit shift and click this to disable it, we can see what affected the whole thing. And I'm eyeballing down here because I painted out specially from the gradient. So I'm seeing kind of how that changed down there. That's fine. And I'll go ahead and do the same trick where I'll right click on the foreground, so I'm duplicating the last layer, and then I'll hold on shift and select both of these. We'll go up to layer and merge layer, and use Control E if you can. Memorize as many of these hotkeys as you can, because they really come in handy, and they'll streamline your creative workflow. And you spend more time thinking about your creativity and what you're doing, rather than, oh, I need to go up to layer, and you just spend a lot of time aggregate throughout your workflow, selecting all these things, when you could just be using quick hotkeys that you memorized. So I really recommend that. Next, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this layer, hitting Control J. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it Orangey Glow. What I want to do here is, with this Orangey Glow, I want to make this kind of pop out and be warmer in this area, because it is in the sky. I need it to be on the foreground to match. And to do that, I will go to Filter, Camera Raw again, and I will pull the color balance a little bit more orange, a little bit more purple. And then what I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to up the white point, lower the highlights a bit, and I can just click this on and off to see what's happening. Maybe not that orange, slightly less. And I will up the contrast quite a bit, just a little bit. And I'm actually going to lower I'm going to keep the clarity where it's at. I'm actually going to up the white point even more, and a little bit of contrast. Up the black point and the shadow. There we go. So I'm getting this like warm glow over here now. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to hold on Alt, and I'm going to put a black mask on it, and then I'm going to paint it in where I want it, because I don't want it affecting this whole mountain. I just want it to be over here. So I'll hold on Alt and click this little mask to get a black mask. And then what I'll do is, I'll take a white brush, 15%, and I'll paint it in. So I'll start here, click, grow, click, and I'm just kind of painting it in, making my brush a little bit bigger, and just kind of painting it in. It's a soft brush, and it's just going to paint in really nice and naturally. So I just kind of stroke it. Gosh, oh no. Don't take that in the wrong way. So I'm just going to stroke like it's a paintbrush and kind of go through here. I'll click this on and off and see, and I kind of want it to bleed down into here as well. So there's kind of painting in nice. And yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Maybe I want to add contrast to it, and rather than opening it up in the camera raw again, what I can do is I can grab this little adjustment layer and go to brightness contrast, and I can clip this to this adjustment, so it'll only affect what's being adjusted on the mask and the layer. And I'll hold on Alt, and I'll kind of drag my mouse in between the brightness contrast and the orange glow, and I'll hit click and then let go of everything. So now it's clipped. So now when I do this adjustment, it's only going to affect what's on that adjustment. So this adjustment is only going to affect this adjustment. It's adjustmentception or adjustception. I don't know, whatever you want to name it. But that's what's happening. And then I can actually up the contrast and the brightness, which I kind of want to. It makes it more of like a dreamy glow when I up the contrast and the brightness. And so I like what it's doing up here, but I don't like what it's doing down here. So simply I can go on the mask, and this is like dual masking. I can go with my black brush, 20%, 30%, and I can just paint it out. So I'm painting out that adjustment, which is affecting this one. So I like what's going on right here, maybe not so much right here. I'll just paint it out. So that way I have like multiple adjustments working with different masks, and it's like a really it's a pretty precise way and very nice. And maybe I don't like it a little bit right here, just kind of up in this area. So I'd say about right there. And what I can do now is, these are basically one layer. I can count these as one layer. So to merge these all into one layer and then make a new layer, is I need to duplicate the former one by hitting Control J. And then actually I'm going to right click on it, hit duplicate, and then I'll rename it the crazy letters, so we can see right here the layer pops up, the crazy one, and then we just hold on shift and select all these and go to image or edit or layer. I get this wrong every single time. Merge layers. So now it's called brightness contrast, but I'll call this orange glowy contrast. Yeah, 3 Y's, I know. I'm the worst. So like that. So now it kind of matches the sky a little bit better. Yeah, it matches a lot what's going on over here. And now I can go crazy, so you can keep doing whatever adjustments you want, but this kind of workflow is really, really powerful, where you can come in and just have kind of creative control with the filtering and masking, and it works for any pictures. Really, it does. It's a concept that you can use in a lot of different pictures. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to look at it and see, what do I want to do? I want to make these white snow parts pop more, and the way that I do that is I'm going to dodge here. And then what I also want to do is I want to actually kind of gradient and make these a little bit darker up in this area, so my eyes stay focused here and don't wander out into these kind of no man's land. There's nothing really exciting going on. And I also want to add like a light source. It'll look a little bit ridiculous. I like adding light sources because it tells your eyes, I think your eyes kind of start maybe right here in the image with the detail. Oh, what I also do is I want to add detail here. So I want to add this detail so it's there, so you can see in the blast zone and see that, and it'll draw your eyes up into the light source over here, and it'll make it nice and dodged in the light source here. It may not be to your taste. You don't have to do this in your own image. You can just leave it how it is if you want a more natural looking image. It's kind of up to you. And then from here it'll be dodged and nice and bright, and it'll come up to about right here, and we'll kind of darken and vignette this area. So first things first is I'm going to add the light source. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to name it hard light. I'm going to change the blend mode to hard light. I'm going to call this I'll call it epic light. Shout out Daniel Greenwood. And then I'm going to take my already orange brush. I'm going to desaturate it a little bit. It's kind of a preference thing that you'll have to mess around with what colors work. I'm going to go to about 10%, or I'll go 5% opacity. And I remember I'm on a soft brush. I'm going to start about right here. I'm going to start here and I'm going to click, and as I click, I'm growing it. And grow it like that. So that way it's like a lot of epic light coming in. Maybe a little bit. Actually, I kind of like where it's going. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make another one. I'm going to call it hard light again. And I'm going to use maybe a deeper saturated one. I'm going to come in on the middle of it, and I'm just going to click a couple more times. And I'm clicking rapidly right now. And I'm making just like the thick right there. So that way we have a nice like gradient glow. So it starts here and here. And then what I can do here is I can call this core epic light. I can hold shift and grab both of these layers, and then with them both selected, I'll just go down to my folder, click here, and I'll rename this my epic light that no one will probably like. Maybe a few. We'll see what my Instagram engagement says. IG is a dying app. MySpace Tom, shout out. Please fight. Please fisticuff. If that's how you spell it. Zuckerberg. Not to the death, that's too extreme. Please fisticuff Zuckerberg and win, then change back the algorithms to the good old days. I do blender rollies to remind me of better times. Oh, that's enough. That's all I can do. But you get the gist of it. Changed the whole name. That's epic. Anyway, a little tangent. Fun stuff. We want to try to have fun here, because masking and layering can get really boring, but once you get it streamlined, it gets more fun, and this is how I stay sane. So that's my epic light, and let's say I like really like it, but it's a little bit too much right here, so I can actually just throw a mask on the whole thing, come with a black brush, and I can paint it out. Maybe I don't, so I'm only at 5% opacity. I wasn't doing anything. Go to like 20%. Ooh, hit enter, and then I'll kind of paint it out of this ridge right here. And maybe it's too much, so I can click it on and off and kind of see. Maybe it's a little bit too intense, like right at the core of the mountain here. So go about right there. That looks pretty good. Then what I can do too, if like I don't like the, I don't know if you can clip a brightness contrast. No, you can't to a actual folder here. So maybe I want to add a little bit more contrast to the sky. What I can do is here, I can come in, I'm actually going to, so I'm going to hit this, I'm going to come into the brightness contrast. And the way I did that, let me delete it. Sorry, I'm getting spazzy again. Go down to my adjustments here, click it, I'll go up to brightness contrast, and I have a brightness contrast layer. Go ahead and click the little sunshine, and I will up contrast quite a bit. Maybe a little bit of brightness, but mostly contrast. And what I'll do here is I'm actually going to paint it out of where I don't want it, because I kind of like the whole thing being a little more contrasty. So I'm going to, I don't know how I'm gonna paint it out of this area, because this is way too dark. I'm gonna go like 40% actually and paint it out. So now I can click it on and off and kind of see where it's going, and maybe I can paint it out of here. No, I'll paint it back in right there. I can even paint it out of here if I wanted. So I want the sky to be more contrasty. Yeah, I like that. So that's like a nice little contrast adjustment. And then I'll go right here and I'll make another one. I'm going to call this Contrast Me Up, boy. Yeah, I'm getting ridiculous with these. I'm going to call this one Vignette. Yeah, nice and boring Vignette. And what a vignette is, it's like black around the... It's a vignette. Just Google it. I can't explain it. I'm too dumb. I don't know the technical... I just know what it looks like. I can't explain it technically. So I actually like adding vignette to my image. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to be like, whoop. And no, I don't want to drop the brightness too much. I don't like using brightness contrast actually. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. I'm going to go to my adjustments again. I'm going to do exposure. I don't know why, I just like it. So I'm going to name this vignette again. And I will drop the exposure like that. And then what I will do is I will hit Control I and invert this to a black mask. So now you can guess, we can take this black mask, it's not affecting anything on the layer. We can take this and go to a white brush and go 15%. I'll paint it in this area. I'm painting it in, just it's real subtle. I'm just painting it into the corners up here. 15%, just clicking around and kind of painting it in. You'll get a feel of like what I mean by painting it in when you come in here with a soft like 10 to 20% brush. Soft, and you just kind of paint it in. And so you can see on the mask it's only affecting really the corners. It's like that. And maybe I don't want it too much in the Milky Way, so I go back with a black brush and I just paint it out of right here in the core. Click a bunch of times to get it out. Maybe I don't. Maybe I want it a little bit. Not around the stars here. Okay, so now we've created like a nice glow in the contrast. So what we can do here is to, maybe we don't really need to dodge and burn. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit Control-Alt-Shift-E, also known as in the Layers tab, Merge Visible. So what that does is it merges every single layer, but it doesn't actually merge them. So a merge would make all these layers into one nice layer, and it'd get rid of all this. And that can be really nice if you're at any point, your computer can't maybe not handle all the duplicate pictures, so it starts growing the file and it gets too big and your computer gets slow. So what you could do at any point is you can go to Edit, you don't go to Edit, you go to Layer, and you go to Merge Layers. It'll merge all these layers into one. So now we just have one image and we can start with, so it just reduced it from to half a gigabyte to 60 megabytes. So we reduced it 90 or down to 1/10. We literally just decimated the file size, and that's great for Photoshop and depending on how powerful your processing computer is. My computer with these big raw files, even though it's pretty nice, still can slow down sometimes, and I'll do that. What we're going to do instead here is we are going to flatten all the layers without actually flattening them. What I mean by that is we can hit Control-Alt-Shift-E. So just hold on Control-Alt-Shift and then hit E. All four of those buttons together and see what happens. I'll hit Control-Z and I'll go, you have to go to the top like visible layer and you just select it. You just have to be up in this area in your Layers tab and you hit Control-Alt-Shift and then E. So all at once. And what it does is it takes all the visible layers and rather than flattens them, it makes a new layer out of them. So it's almost like you flattened it and have the advantages of having one layer, except you have a massive file size and it gets even bigger. But it gives you like a whole new layer that you can work on. So I can come in here and I can start dodging and I can duplicate and start with that whole process. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to display to you how I made a mistake and how this workflow is great for mistakes. So I did all these edits and then I was like thinking I want more epic light. I want more of that ridiculous epic light. I'm not going to hold back on my ridiculous, kind of probably shitty looking epic light to a lot of people. So I'm just going to go for it. And I'm going to go back to my epic light here. And with this layer off, I can just delete it. And with this non-destructive workflow, I just go back to my epic light layer. And I remember I had my epic light here, and then I had this one kind of in the core, more saturated. So I'll actually just go to this layer right here, and I'm just going to pick like a pretty random desaturated orange-ish, slightly saturated. I'm just going to hit, I can't be at 29% opacity, because if I hit like that, it's going to be a little bit too much. So you need to come down and double click, hit 0.5 for 5%, enter, and then now I have 5% on my brush. I'm going to use my brush right here. I'm just going to paint directly on with the color swatch onto the epic light. And I'll right click and I'll make sure I have my hardness down all the way. I'm just going to hit it like right about here, right about here. Yeah, like that. Maybe I'll go, oh, it's too much. Maybe I'll go about, I'm going to go like 2%. I'm going to hit 0.2 and hit like 2%. I'm just going to hit like, no, I'm going to hit like right here. Yeah, maybe like that. Okay, so now I have it. I'll go ahead and I'll do the same thing I was talking about earlier where I can merge all these layers without actually merging them and just create a brand new fresh layer with everything that's there. Control Alt Shift, holding down all three, and then tap E. So all four of those buttons were down together and it creates a new layer. I'll name this my save layer. It's kind of like a save layer. And so from here, now I can start duplicating it. I can go ahead, right click, and I'll duplicate this and I'll see what I'll do. I'll call it dodge for, I'll just call it dodge and burn because we're going to do another dodge and burn here. And this one, so I can go ahead and duplicate and mask it and do that same process I was doing with my sky and my foreground where I create a new layer. At this point, I don't need to, let's say I did a bunch of things and I had a mask on it and I had a bunch of stuff masked out like so. I wouldn't need to create a new layer, duplicate this like we were doing earlier, and then merge it and dodge and burn. What I can do is, let me delete and start over. I can just go to this one directly, name it whatever, okay, and then let's say I'm done with that and I want another layer on top. I can just hit Control Alt Shift E again and it'll create a new layer with everything merged and the effects of what I had on the previous layer. So slightly different. You can do the same way we did it before. It's kind of up to you. At this point you can just hit Control Alt Shift E to create that new layer. So I'm going to start from scratch for my save layer. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. I'll name this again dodge and burn. I will now proceed to do what the title is telling me to do. What I want to do is dodge and burn. So I think if I go with my midtones around here, I can come with my highlights and I may dodge it too much. Yeah, I may blow out a little bit of the highlights. Maybe I'll just hit it once with 10 and I'll come up and I'll hit my midtones with my dodge tool. And I kind of just hit here. And what I don't like is the color balance on the foreground. So I'm fine, I'll maybe dodge and burn just a little bit. I'm actually going to come in here, I'm going to go with my dodge tool. I'm going to go at, so I want to brighten with my dodge. I'm going to go down to my shadows. And I'm actually going to zoom in using Control Plus. And I will make my cursor a lot smaller. I'm actually going to shadow dodge, so I'm going to boost the shadows here. And I'm also going to boost the shadows right along this little crevasse or whatever. It's like a river now, but it was like hot magma. It was literally hot magma flowing down in the blast zone. Crazy stuff going on here. Maybe I'll brighten these ones up. And I can just click this layer on and off to see what I'm doing. Maybe that's too bright. It's kind of, I like it. I'm fine. So I go with my midtones now. Change my dodge to the midtones. So now I'll hit the midtones nearby. Kind of just hit the whole area. Actually, I'll go with the whole area on the shadows too. I'll just kind of hit the whole darn area. Maybe I'll hit this whole area too. I just want to brighten that whole thing up. So I'll zoom out. Be like, whoa, that is terrible. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag it and we'll throw it in the trash and act like that never happened. And I'm going to start over. Duplicate layer. Dodge and burn. So I'll come in here. I'll do the foreground first. I know I did a couple up in the sky. Do the foreground. Shadow. Go about 10%. I'm just going to do the whole thing. The whole area like this. I'll do this whole area kind of hitting the nearby areas as well, so it looks a little more natural. Go to midtones now. With the midtones, I'll kind of make my cursor smaller and just hit the midtone areas that are on these little lanes. That's probably a terrible effect. So I did this with some mountain climbers on my Mount Rainier shot, which maybe I'll make a video for that eventually. And I was able to kind of accentuate these. So what I'll actually do is I'll delete that again, and this is, it's fail-proof, this system, I tell you, it's fail-proof. I'll call this dodge and burn again, and we'll start with the sky. We'll get our momentum from there. Get my dodge, go to my highlights, and this is kind of nice because I can test out different things and just delete it. So you can always have fun experimenting. That's how you innovate, that's how you get creative, is by failing a lot. Seriously, and I'm not going to go into some deep life question, but in this deep life rant about it, but this is a microcosm for greater things. Just teasing. It is, though. So you can just fail in here, and you can end up creating new things by just being able to mess around and knowing that, you know, failure doesn't matter over here because you can always restart and try again. I'm in my dodge. I am in my highlights, and I will hit this area. And I'm okay with that. What I want to do is I actually want to come in here on filter and camera raw. And what I want to do is I only want to change the color balance for the foreground. I want it to be more, it's too green to me. I can just see the color balance. I don't like it. So to do that, rather than just do, so I can do filter, camera raw. Let's just go do my adjustments. I don't want to affect the sky. I only want to hit the foreground. I just want to bring this more purple. Way like that. I like, this looks way dreamier. It looks way better. I'll hit OK. I like this way more, but it's affecting the sky. So I could try to manually paint it out, or I could go down into my non-destructive workflow, and I can actually select the foreground and make it into a selection. So then I could put that selection on a mask. So I can make a mask out of one of my original foregrounds. So I have the juicy foreground with the mask right here, so why wouldn't I just copy the juicy foreground mask? So if I do that, if I hold on Control is how you get this little command, or you hit Control or Command if you're on Mac, and if you hold that down and you glance over with your mouse on a mask, it'll give you this little square. And I'm just going to make sure I'm recording because this thing keeps pooping out, so it may be chopped. Alright, we're good for now. So I hold on Command or Control and I hover over this and I see a little square and I click it and voila. So it'll take the mask and it'll turn it into a selection. And it's off because remember, after we did the juicy foreground masking, I hit Control D to deselect that. We had the foreground was happening. We had the foreground warping. That's what we did. We did a bunch of warping. So I'll hit Control D. So I need to hit Control actually on this layer. If I hold on Control, I'll get the same thing. There's no mask, but this in itself is like a mask if I was just to take this selection. So if I hit, that doesn't even make any sense. Just trust me and hold on Command or Control and hover over foreground and then click, and we have a mask for the foreground. And I can apply this to my dodge and burn layer, which actually turned out to be color balance. So I just hit that and voila. So that mask is now helping out in the feature here. So I click this on and off. It's only affecting here. And then I hold on Shift and now you can see it. You can hold on Shift and click and just see it affect it. It's not hitting here. So that's exactly what I wanted here. So that looks fine with me. And yeah, I like that. That looks pretty good. I'd say, I'm trying to think what else. I think I promised some things that I was thinking about doing earlier. And right now I'm pretty content with how this image is turning out. It's not the same. It's never going to be the same as your original one here. It's never going to be the same. This was edited a year ago and it's different, and I have a different editing style, so you know, of course I'm going to be different. Way more contrast, way more saturation. Maybe what I could do here, I think in my next video, I'm going to go through some of my iconic shots that people really liked, and I'm going to find the raw files. I'm going to do my seascape next, and maybe more in that one we'll do a little bit more Milky Way. There's still masking, but we'll have more time for just Milky Way adjustments and fun color balance stuff. So I'll go in more depth over there. I'll show you star reduction and how to make some things in the Milky Way core pop. And for now, we will do one more little adjustment on the, well, I'll change this to dodge. So what happened? Okay, I need to digress here. So I'm actually losing out on my burns here because I did a bunch of dodging here, which brightened here, but then I masked it and turned it into color balance. So the dodges I did here are masked out. So I will go and change this to color balance. And then what I'll do, I'll hit Control, Alt, Shift, and E, create a new layer, call this dodges. And I'll come in here, grab my dodge tool, highlights, and I'm actually going to do midtones first around the light because the highlights might get blown out. So I'll do a little bit midtone work, bright. Hit Control Z to go back a couple times. I don't know if I like that. Maybe I'll do a little bit of highlights right here on the actual, yeah. Oh, that looks a little bit too much. I think that's good. Maybe I'll do 5% around here. Just slightly dodge that a little bit more. Come in here, I'm going to dodge these guys a little bit right here. Maybe what I can do is I can actually burn these to make them stand out. So if I dodge the nearby, there's not much highlights, there's more midtones. I'll go midtones 10%. I'll come here and I'll actually paint, I'll make these a little bit brighter. And then I'll come in with my burn tool and I will not do 100%. That would be rip, that would be dead. So I'll do 5% and I'll come in and I'm at shadows. So I'm going to darken the shadows and I'll actually come in and, whoa, it really darkens these lanes right here. Adds a lot of really cool contrast, I think. It's mostly going to affect the lanes that are already dark. So I come in right here and hit these little lines, these little details. So we're adding like tonal contrast, and we'll actually like add to the kind of the clarity of the image. Hit right here. Maybe I'll come in right here and hit these ones too. That just area adds more shadow to the epic light, makes it look a little bit more realistic and dramatic. So I'll keep these dark ones coming up here. Dark and dodge, or burned. I always get dodge and burn mixed up. Or I'll say it messed up. So now look at that. It adds way too much now that I zoom out. So what I can do here is I'll mask it, and then I'll come in with a black brush. So I have a white mask, and I need my brush, and I'll need about 40, no, oh boy. I need about 25%. That sounds good. Yeah, 25%. And I'll just come in here and I'll paint it out, because it'll paint out the dodge adjustments. Just come in here and I'll paint it out until I see something that, you know, kind of works aesthetically visible. I like that one nice and dark. Paint it out a little bit here. Keep that. Kind of like it like that. That looks pretty good. We're getting a lot of these blast zone details over here, and right in here it starts tapering off and it gets all dark. So this image, this part of the image really will be not really looked at. I'm mostly focusing on the little bit of it leads up right here, and it shows the crater as you go back down, and then people explore over here. So I can actually come back in, and maybe I'll dodge midtones over here. In this crater to make them pop a little bit more. Oh, I'm on the mask, so it's not doing anything. I need to be on the actual layer. That's why I wasn't doing anything. So make sure you're always selecting the right part that you're trying to do in the layers. Make sure you're selecting on the right layer or the mask that you're trying to affect. So hit these areas with a little bit of midtones. Yeah, this. I like how this side of the mountain is popping quite a bit. It's adding a little bit too much saturation. I'll go highlights too, and I'll come in here with a little bit of highlight work. Make the snow glow. Yeah, I like the glow of the snow right in here especially. So it's a little bit too saturated for my taste, so I just go down to the dodge tool, I right click, come down to the sponge, desaturate, and I'll come in here at 10%. I'll just kind of desaturate the area because it's going to make it look more white. That's what I want. Desaturate this, mostly this area right here. So that way the mountain in the inside core, yeah, it'll draw our eyes more in here. And so I'm also going to come in and burn right here. So I'm looking at the texture of this image, and this should be darker. I think I'm going to burn about 5%. Yeah, it'll create more of a dramatic, burn right about in here. The shadows a little bit. Maybe I'll burn some of the midtones as well. Yeah, that creates a way more dramatic approach and look to it right here. I'll burn these a little bit. So I think I burned a little bit too much right here, so I'll just go into my mask. I'll take my brush, and see how I'm cycling back and forth. I'll do an edit, and I'm like, oh, I like it, but it's a little bit too much, a little too overkill. So I just go into the mask with the black brush, and I just start painting it out. Maybe I'll go 20% opacity. Just paint it out like that, and zoom out and look. Yeah, it looks a lot better to me. So there we go. Hope you guys learned a lot in this video. I like this image. It's different than my first edit. It's really fun to go back and re-edit images as you pick up more tools, learn more strategies, and so there's a lot of times where I bought Ryan Dyer's. I bought one of his videos. He's really great. He's an insane landscape photographer, and probably one of my favorites. And he's one of the reasons why I want to get into more landscape, because he does slightly dreamy, but still very realistic and just very dramatic light. And he knows how to process and shoot. He's amazing. You should go check him out. And I bought one of his process videos. I didn't do it to copy it. I bought it because I really like his work and I like some of his stuff, so I wanted to get better at landscape. And so I knew most of the tools in the video, but what I did learn was how there's a couple tools that he just used differently that I had never used. These tools that I already knew how, but just different applications. And basically what happened was I learned a lot of how he uses tools. So you may recognize a lot of these tools, but may have just never seen how they can be applied in different situations. A lot of people didn't realize that you can dodge and burn the Milky Way sparingly, because you can overkill it, but you can dodge and burn parts of the Milky Way. And it's just cool being able to, you don't have to necessarily, I like a lot of people, once I started making some images and people started copying them, and it was very flattering at first, and it still is, but a lot of people would just, at first they would just copy it straight out because they're trying to learn, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't care. I copied Dan Greenwood and his whole blends, but then I ended up evolving from it and just taking parts of his workflow and applying it to mine. So you learn from a lot of different people, you learn from connecting with other people, and you're able to get this big kind of conglomerate of just all these random different things you pick up from other people, and that's kind of what makes you unique. You're this puzzle put together with lots of other different puzzle pieces from different puzzles. That's a shitty metaphor, but you get what I'm saying, right? So you can just pick up little things from different videos and apply it to your own workflow and use it in your own way. So I hope you all learned a lot. I had a really pretty fun time making this video, and make sure to stay tuned for my other videos coming out. They'll be on my website. I'll probably announce it on Instagram. I don't want to be too spammy, but you can also sign up for my email newsletter. Just shoot me an email. It's on my website, and I'll have a little newsletter thing where you can sign up for future updates for videos. I hope to sell these as a pack. I'm going to sell them one by one, and then maybe discount people who buy the first one, and then when I come out with other ones, I'll do a whole bundle thing where you can just buy multiple videos at once if you are really interested. But I'm going to do this one as kind of just a probing video to see how it's received. If you use a lot of these techniques in your own images, and you really like the way they turned out, and you're like, oh great, Derek, thanks for teaching me all this stuff, I would really appreciate you just send me the image and give me your feedback and what you liked and how it worked out for you. I like to always advertise every now and then, people that I've taught, to see, because it's good advertising. If you do well, then I do even better. I do well, it's a mutual, very symbiotic relationship. So if you like something on this video, just let me know, and it'll help me improve my future videos. I always appreciate constructive criticism and what you liked. So keep that in mind. One more closing thought that I just thought of is, so this video was kind of cut and paste because my video recording software kept crashing. I'm working to fix on that, and hopefully will use any of the proceeds I get from these videos to buy nicer video production quality, so I can get an intro and make it smooth and whatnot. So anyway, it crashed, so it might be a little cut and paste for some of it should still have its continuity, but it might be a little cut and paste. And I don't know if I already mentioned it or if it got cut, but I just wanted to reiterate the hotkeys. Make sure you're always using the hotkeys and memorizing them. It'll save you so much time in the long run and allow you to just focus on creativity. Next point would be, with these videos and learning, again, I don't know if I already covered this, it's nice because I'm going to send you all the TIFF files. And I'll actually send you this PSD file with all the layers intact so you can see mine as well, and you can have it to break down. But hopefully you'll be able to make your own using these tip files, and you can just follow along with the video, and it'll almost be like real time, where you can have these files open in Photoshop, and then you have your video playing, and you can pause it at any point. So I'll go ahead and do a couple commands and steps. You pause it, and you go through them yourself with the same files that I'm using. And I think that's a really great way to learn. And I just wanted to make sure that was kind of, you guys were aware that that's a really great way to learn. In all my workshops, that's how I did it. I did a lot of recorded videos, and then I did follow-up one-on-one post-processing, follow-up one-on-one post-processing, because everybody was at a different level with their needs, so I could cater to each person during the post-processing lessons. So stay tuned for more. I will have soon on my website. We'll have a bunch of different. No, I don't need that. It'll have. Let's see how we're doing. I'm getting there. I'm almost done with the website, but in the Learn Astro tab over here, we'll have workshops. I have post-processing lessons. These are where the videos will be, so you're probably already in here. And in the lessons, it shouldn't be working right now, but it'll have the videos, but it should also have options for one-on-one lessons and feedback and a bunch of other things. Or maybe it'll be wait, why do I have two? Oh, no, so I was looking at, geez. All right, I need to sign off before I do anything crazy. Oh, and if you want to give me a testimonial, I always appreciate that. I'll have a little thing for if you want to sign up for your email list so you get notifications, but this is where I'll be putting all my post-processing stuff. And you can also check out the one-on-one lessons or other videos, and I'll probably do like a bundle deal. But yeah, use the videos. Just please don't send these to anybody else. This is my livelihood. I use all my money and make a lot of sacrifices to make sure that I can make these videos and try to make the best content I can, and then teach other people that content. So I'd appreciate it. You're welcome to teach other people the things that you learn. I'm fine with that. And like talking, you don't have to never use the word dodge and burn. I didn't invent dodge and burning, but I would really appreciate if y'all would. I probably won't have any problems, but just want to reiterate, don't be sharing. I've had people offer me other people's post-processing videos, and I just have to turn them down, because if I like the person's post-processing, I'll pay it and know how it is. So I'd appreciate that, and I appreciate you guys for getting through this video and learning a lot, and I hope to hear a lot of good feedback and just hear what you guys' thoughts were and make some more. So take care.